Hey guys, First Regardsman here, and today I'll be talking about one of the most annoying mechanics in Space Marine 2, at least in my opinion, which are the Enraged enemies. Now, Enraged enemies were added into the game during the Lethal Difficulty update months ago. Basically, if you kill a Majoris next to another Majoris or disrupt the reinforcement call, a Majoris will go enraged, they will start to glow red, get a huge stagger resist, full HP recovery, on top of doing tremendously more damage. Now, this is not inherently a bad thing, and enemy modifiers in games can be pretty helpful for like game design, just more fun gameplay. But in this game, some of the enemies are already kind of cracked, like Devourers and Sword Warriors, and putting them into an enraged state where they have 100% stagger resist, or like a damn near 100% stagger resist, is super obnoxious. Now, the reason I don't like this in Space Marine 2 in particular is that Space Marine 2's enemy design is actually pretty good. Things like Lictors, Raveners, even the melee Terminators, as annoying as they can be to fight, they actually fit their niche pretty well. They disrupt you, they make it hard to pull off the things you want to pull off, and that's kind of the point of a special spawn in a horde shooter. And really, enraged mechanics are not unique to this game. They are in Darktide, and they are also in Vermintide, I believe, and other modifiers are coming to Space Marine 2 as well. I just think that the enraged mechanic, as it is currently implemented in this one, is kind of lazy and very obnoxious. And this brings me to what I was talking about earlier with the Bone Sword Warriors, which I think are currently the most overtuned enemy in Space Marine 2, at least as far as Majoris go, because these guys have a Bone Sword block that has 100% damage reduction versus range and melee attacks. So you break the block, it is ridiculous how effective this actually is. It can 100% stop the damage of an assault ground pound, which is just absurd that like one Majoris enemy can remove the entire class ability of a melee class just by putting up their little bone sword arms. And 100% damage reduction versus range attacks also means you get 0 CHP off these guys. Super obnoxious, but isn't like flat out broken until you interact with the enraged mechanic. Because when a Bone Sword Warrior goes enraged, they get the 100% stagger resist and often heal themselves to pretty much full. It is incredibly annoying, but also one of the most ridiculous interactions in the game, because basically your options to actually break their block when they start blocking like this are to use a double block surge charge on a block weapon in this game, or something like the assault ground pound to stagger them. That's probably the only things that can actually stagger these guys, and besides that, you basically just have to wait for them to attack you. And this is just ridiculous, because there are times where you'll be sitting there looking at a sword warrior, those have like their little bone swords up, and there is literally nothing you can do except just like whack at air and get staggered yourself and wait for them to open up, or just wait for them to attack you on their own. And that's just like a ridiculous interaction to me. Now, while the enraged mechanic may feel really bad in the case of sword warriors, I don't think it feels too bad with whip warriors, because these guys are primarily dangerous for the absurd amount of damage they can put out. And while it is pretty annoying, it is not really unfair. Like, you know, if you miss your blocks and dodges, you will get cooked. That's kind of the whole point. Now, what doesn't feel very fair, at least to a lot of people, are the ranged enemies when they go enraged, because they do a stupid amount of damage, and ranged fire is just harder to avoid than melee attacks, especially on things like Reworked Marines, where their shots aren't even seen, and oftentimes your HP will just get nuked out of nowhere. This feels pretty bad, and I think part of this issue is less so the enraged mechanic itself, and more so that unlike a game like Darktide, where if you enter into melee combat with a ranged enemy, they will pull out their swords and attack you, the ranged enemies in Space Marine 2 will just run away from you and continue to shoot you, or in an even more annoying way, they will literally just pull out their gun and just shoot you at point blank, which is ridiculously stupid. And Devourers, when they go enraged, probably have like the highest DPS output of any character in the game, including the DPS output of some of the bosses, because they pretty much nuke your HP. I don't think there is any character in this game outside like the Bulwark or the Heavy that can properly survive like a triple burst from a Devourer at point blank, because their pellets will spread out over distance if they shoot you far away, but if they shoot you up close, they will just shotgun you, and it is absurdly damaging. And so much of Space Marine 2's gameplay loop revolves around interrupting enemy attacks and staggering them to disrupt some of the more heavy-hitting things, that ranged enemies feel pretty terrible, melee enemies like the Sword Warriors are just flat-out overtuned while enraged, and having a full HP heal mechanic on them that's actually removed in the Siege mode can feel really bad on these slower weapons like the Thunder Hammer, because a lot of the weapons in this game, they have to bet on getting an execute to actually get all your CHP back. When an enemy goes enraged, they get this full HP heal in the absolute operations. You're basically robbed of an execute at times, which can actually kill you, which does feel pretty terrible. And as far as Siege mode is concerned, they do not actually get this full HP heal like I mentioned before. But the other problem here is that there are so many damn enraged enemies in like wave 15 plus of siege mode that weapons like the melta rifle and the multi-melta, they slowly start to fall off until they do basically nothing because they bank on staggers so much. Like a melta's main benefit outside of things like damage or like just being able to punch through multiple enemies is staggering the enemy in front of you, and if all of your enemies are enraged, your entire weapon's like shtick just doesn't work, and that feels pretty bad, at least for me. The reason I want to talk about this today is that Space Marine 2 is about to enter its Year 2 roadmap that will be revealed later this week or so. And going into Year 2, I am curious to see how much new content we'll actually see from Saber Interactive, because they have talked about modifiers previously. Space Marine 2 made a ton of money. They've already announced Space Marine 3. How much content they'll actually put out in Year 2, we'll see. But I'm hoping it'll be more than Year 1, because it seems like the Year 1 roadmap was really more so just like their only plan for this game, and then they were going to move on. But this game was such a wild success that they have a ton of money just flowed into the company, and maybe they'll be able to put more back into the game as a result of that. We'll see what they actually do. But as far as modifiers are concerned, there are some very simple modifiers they could implement into Space Marine 2. They're not as annoying as things like Enraged Enemies or, God forbid, tight formations, one like the most annoying modifiers this game has ever seen. But if they do a better job than that in the lethal difficulty update, I think people will be pretty happy, because Space Marine 2 doesn't have that many operations in it. We have the 9 operations, 3 of those were added post-launch, and we also have the Siege mode. But Siege mode is very buggy, people still get disconnected all the time, and also Siege mode is just like this enormous time commitment that I think most players are still playing the operations for a reason, because operations are just more dynamic, and having really good modifiers in these operations is a very easy way to keep them fresh, because having only 9 maps, like I mentioned before, that's really not that many. You know, Darktide has way more than that, Vermintide definitely had more than that. I'm sure they're going to add more operations over time, but I feel like having these modifiers is the easiest way and like fastest way to really change the way the gameplay loop works. And the gameplay loop in Space Marine 2 is by no means bad, but could definitely use some work. Having some more interesting modifiers for that would be quite interesting. So I'm curious to see what people want in the comments section below. Let me know what kind of modifiers you would like to see, if you have any good ideas. Maybe Saber Interactive will put out a poll like they did for like the CHP recovery, or maybe they'll just put out more polls in general to ask people what they would like to see, because believe it or not, Saber Interactive is actually quite interactive with their player base compared to a lot of game devs, which is kind of shocking. And even though Saber Interactive, it does get a ton of shit thrown at them, some of it is justified, some of it certainly is not. They have fixed up their game quite a bit, and they listen to the community, so I'm curious to see what they'll do next. But that is pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. Let me know if you think that Enraged Enemies should be reworked in Space Marine 2's Year 2, or what kind of content you'd like to see from modifiers and just in general. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, guys, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.